I never imagined my life would come to this, a return to New York not as the woman I once was, but as a shell of myself, broken and silent. My name is Emily Carter, and only a year ago, I was a captain in the United States Army, stationed overseas and full of pride. I had served in some of the most dangerous regions of the world, leading men and women I love like family. I was steady and strong, with hands that never trembled and a voice that carried command. But all that changed in a single moment, during my last deployment on the war-torn outskirts of Aleppo, Syria. An explosion ripped through the night, tossing me into the air. When I woke up, I was told I'd never move my arms or legs again. I would never speak, never run, never even brush my hair. My entire world collapsed in on itself, leaving only my eyes and the faintest ability to shake my head. They flew me home to New York in a medevac jet, the kind I'd seen so many times before but never thought would be for me. The days in the hospital blurred together, each one a fog of pain and confusion. I was admitted to St. Agnes Hospital in Brooklyn, a place that smelled of antiseptic and loneliness. I became a fixture in my room, just another patient, barely alive, with only a beeping monitor and the occasional nurse for company. My body had betrayed me, and I felt like a prisoner trapped behind my skin. I could see the sympathy in the nurses' eyes, their pity as they bathed me and brushed my hair. But I had no way to respond except with tears that slid silently down my cheeks. In those endless days and nights, my mind drifted to the life I used to know. I remembered my beautiful brownstone on the Upper West Side, a sanctuary I had built with my husband, Michael Carter. The house was my pride. Every room was filled with memories and laughter. Michael and I had lived there for almost 10 years, sharing dreams of a future of children, of quiet Sunday mornings spent reading together in our sunlit living room. I had always thought that if something happened to me, home would be my refuge, and Michael would be the one to carry me through the storm. For weeks, I waited for him to come. Each day I told myself he was busy, maybe he was caught up at his job on Wall Street, or perhaps he was arranging things at home for my return. But the truth haunted me late at night, as the machines hummed and the world fell silent. He hadn't even called. The nurses said he was on his way, but days became weeks, and still I was alone. I clung to hope, replaying every good memory in my mind, believing that when Michael finally walked through the door, his arms would be around me and his voice would remind me that I was still loved, still wanted. The day Michael finally appeared, everything inside me tensed with anticipation. I heard his footsteps in the hall before I saw him. He entered the room in a perfectly tailored suit, looking every bit the successful banker he was, his hair neatly combed, his shoes shining. For a moment my heart leaped. He was here, and maybe things would start to feel normal again. But as he drew closer, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. There was no love there, no sadness, just calculation. He stood beside my bed, glancing at the machines, the tubes, and the pale, motionless woman who was his wife. He smiled, but it was not the smile I remembered. His voice was soft, almost tender, but every word landed like a knife. "Don't worry, Emily," he said, almost in a whisper. "All your property is mine now. Anyway, you're going to die." I blinked in shock, my mind refusing to accept what I had just heard. Had the painkillers made me hallucinate? But no, Michael's eyes were cold, his expression almost amused. I wanted to scream, to beg, to ask why, but I could do nothing. My voice was trapped inside me. My hands, once so strong, could not even curl into fists. All I could do was stare wide-eyed as the man I had loved for over a decade began to pull documents from his briefcase. He pressed paper after paper against my unresponsive hands, using my limp fingers to place my fingerprints where the signatures should be. When that was done, he scribbled his signature, forging mine with practiced ease. I realized then that he must have planned this for a long time, waiting for the right moment to seize everything I owned. My beautiful $2.3 million brownstone, the savings accounts I had built from years of military service and careful investing, even the little things, my jewelry, my late grandmother's paintings from Paris. He was taking it all. He leaned over, his face so close I could smell the familiar cologne he always wore, a scent that once meant comfort and now made me sick.
He patted my cheek, his hand cold against my skin.
"Now you can die peacefully," he said, almost as if he were comforting a child. Your property is mine now. Don't worry, my dear wife. Then he turned and walked away, leaving only the faint echo of his words and the scent of betrayal lingering in the air. I lay there, powerless, as the door clicked shut behind him. The weight of what had happened crashed over me in waves. Everything I had built, everything I had fought for, was gone, not to the war, but to the man I had once trusted with my life. That night I wept silently, wishing I could disappear, wishing I could turn back time. But I was trapped in my own body with nothing but my thoughts and the heartbreak that Michael had left behind. I knew then that the fight for my life had only just begun, and that home was not the safe harbor I had always believed it to be. The days after Michael's betrayal felt longer and darker than any night I'd endured on the battlefield. Lying in my hospital bed, unable to move or even call out for help, I felt as though my spirit was dissolving into the sterile air around me. I could not shake the image of Michael's cold smile as he claimed my life's work for himself. Every time the nurses adjusted my bed or wiped my face with a cool cloth, I wished I could tell them what had happened. But no words would come. My body refused to obey me. I was locked inside myself, a silent witness to my unraveling. The nurses came and went with gentle hands, changing my IVs and turning me so I wouldn't develop sores. They spoke to me softly with practiced kindness, but they could never know the weight I was carrying. At night, when the ward was quiet, I watched the rain patter against the window. I imagined Michael out in the city, dining in Manhattan restaurants, toasting his newfound wealth with people who had never even met me. It was a loneliness I would not wish on my worst enemy. I felt abandoned by the man I loved and by the body I had once trusted to carry me through anything. Sometimes, a young nurse named Lisa would sit by my bed and read the news aloud, her soft voice describing a world that was moving on without me. She didn't know that every story about triumph or hope felt like a cruel joke. My mind drifted to darker places, memories of combat, of friends lost, and of Michael's final words to me. There were nights when I prayed for the machines to stop, for the monitors to fall silent. I didn't want to wake up in this prison again, but fate had other plans. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, with the sky outside the window thick with rain, that my life began to change again. I was staring blankly at the ceiling when I heard footsteps slow and hesitant outside my door. There was a pause, then a gentle knock. The door opened and a figure stepped inside. At first, I thought it was just another doctor, but when our eyes met, a jolt of recognition sparked through me. It was David Miller. My childhood friend from Boston, someone who had always been more like a brother than a friend. We'd grown up together, racing bicycles down the hilly streets, sneaking out to catch Red Sox games, telling each other secrets in the dark. Life had pulled us apart. I went to West Point and then the army, while David moved to London to study law. But even across continents, our bond had never fully disappeared. I'd always thought that if my life fell apart, David would be the one person I could call. Now he was here, standing by my bed, his face older, but his blue eyes just as kind as I remembered. He took in the tubes, the monitors, my motionless form, and for a moment I saw pain flicker across his face.
He knelt beside me, taking my cold hand in his warm, strong grip.
"Emily," he whispered, voice trembling. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." Tears welled up in my eyes, spilling onto the pillow. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. I wanted to tell him how much it meant to see him, how lost I felt, how Michael had destroyed me. But all I could do was blink, hoping he could see the truth in my gaze. I wanted to scream, to pour out the story of my betrayal, but all that came were silent sobs that racked my body. David stayed with me that afternoon, and then he came back the next day and the day after that. He refused to be pushed away by the nurses or the cold indifference of the hospital. He brought me news from the outside, stories about his life in London, about the cases he was working on, about his sister who just had twins. He read to me from my favorite novels and played the music we loved as teenagers. Sometimes, when he thought I was asleep, he would talk softly, telling me how proud he was of my service, and how he wished he'd been there for me sooner. Each visit chipped away at the wall of loneliness and despair. And slowly, against all odds, I began to feel something stir inside me. It started as the faintest tingling in my fingers, a sensation I thought I'd imagined. The doctors called it spontaneous recovery, a rare but not impossible outcome for patients like me. But I knew better. It was hope, David's relentless hope, that was breathing life back into me. One morning, about 2 weeks after his first visit, David came in with a bright smile and a bouquet of wildflowers. He arranged them in a cup by my bedside, filling the sterile room with their earthy scent. After the nurses left, he sat down beside me, looking tired but determined. "I know you can hear me, Emily," he said, squeezing my hand. "And I know you're still in there. I'm not giving up on you. I promise." His words were a lifeline. I focused all my energy on my right hand, willing it to move. The effort was exhausting, but I refused to give up. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I strained, my eyes burning with frustration. And then, miraculously, my index finger twitched. David's eyes widened in disbelief. He grabbed a pen and a notepad from his bag, placing them gently in my palm. "If you can write anything at all, just do it," he pleaded. I summoned every ounce of strength I had. Slowly, painstakingly, I managed to scrawl a shaky, almost unreadable message. "Michael stole everything.
He made me sign it over, help me."
David's face went pale as he read my trembling words. For a moment, he was silent. Then I saw a change in his eyes, a fire, fierce and unyielding. He looked at me, his jaw clenched. "Don't worry, Emily. I know what to do. You'll get everything back." He leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against mine. "I promise you, Em, you're not alone in this. I'm going to fight for you." For the first time since I'd returned home, I felt something like hope flicker in my chest. I didn't know how or when, but I believed David. At that moment, I was no longer just a silent victim. I was a soldier again, and I had found my ally. If war had taught me anything, it was how to survive when the odds were against me. But I had never expected my fiercest battle would be fought from a hospital bed, nor that my greatest weapon would be the loyalty of an old friend. After David read the trembling words I'd managed to write, something shifted between us. He transformed from a concerned visitor to an unstoppable advocate. It was as if he had taken a sacred oath not just to help me heal, but to avenge every wrong that had been done to me. David wasted no time. The very next day, he began to take charge, asking pointed questions of the nurses, requesting copies of every document and record associated with my case, and making phone calls with a tone so fierce it made even the hospital administrators listen. He moved into my empty brownstone on the Upper West Side, using it as both his base and my refuge, a place Michael had abandoned. Too busy basking in his newfound single status in the beaches and nightclubs of Miami. Sometimes I wondered if Michael even remembered I existed, or if my suffering was just a shadow he'd already stepped past. David was methodical and clever. He hired a private investigator named Rebecca, a sharp woman from Chicago with nerves of steel and a talent for uncovering secrets. Together they began to untangle the web Michael had spun. Rebecca tracked Michael's movements in Miami, documenting his lavish spending and new relationships. David, meanwhile, focused on collecting hard evidence. He explained everything to me in the evenings, pulling up a chair by my bed and speaking quietly so the nurses wouldn't overhear. "Michael will slip up," he said one night, his voice low and steady. "Men like him always do."
He thinks he's won, so he'll get cocky, we'll be ready.
A week later, Rebecca called with the news. Michael was throwing a private poker night at his penthouse in Miami Beach. She had managed to secure the floor plan from the building manager and, more importantly, found an opportunity to plant surveillance equipment, tiny, nearly invisible cameras and microphones disguised as smoke detectors and air fresheners. The risk was enormous, but David was resolute. "We need his confession, Emily," he said. "We need proof words that no lawyer can twist or deny." Waiting was excruciating. Every day I watched the phone for news, hoping for a break. I imagined Michael bragging to his friends, spinning stories about his victory over me, not knowing that every word could be his undoing. My hands, still weak and shaking, gripped the bedsheet with anticipation. There was nothing left of the man I had loved. He was a stranger now, a predator wearing my husband's face. Finally, the call came. It was nearly midnight when Rebecca sent David the first audio files. David listened to them in the dim light of my hospital room, his face grim. He didn't say a word as he scrolled through the recordings, but I could see his hands trembling with contained fury. The next morning, he played me the key segment through his phone, placing an earbud gently in my ear. Michael's voice, so familiar and yet so foreign, crackled over the recording. I heard laughter, the clink of glasses, the thrum of poker chips. And then, clear as day, Michael's voice. She couldn't even move. I took her fingerprints and forged her signature, now the brownstone. The stocks, even her family's vineyard in Napa, are mine. She'd be dead in a year anyway. The doctor said so. The room spun as I listened. I felt a strange mix of pain and grim satisfaction. Here was the proof, raw, unfiltered and damning. For the first time since Michael had left me, I believed that justice might be possible. David moved with the precision of a general. He immediately contacted a media liaison he knew from his years in London, a journalist named Anata Price. Within hours, our story began to break. Decorated army captain betrayed by husband. Evidence of fraud and abuse, the headlines screamed. CNN and BBC picked up the story. The Times in London published an in-depth profile. Within a day, my name was everywhere, along with photos from my military service and images of the brownstone I'd called home. The public outrage was immediate and fierce. Social media lit up with support. Strangers from around the world sent messages, promising that justice would be served. I could not speak, but I felt their strength like a current carrying me forward. Michael's world began to collapse at the speed of the news cycle. His business partners pulled away, desperate to avoid the scandal. His social media accounts vanished, and suddenly he was silent. No more photos of Miami nights. No more boastful posts. The city that had seemed so bright for him only weeks before became a cage closing around him. Meanwhile, David assembled a legal team made up of friends from law school, former prosecutors, and a top-notch paralegal named Kate, who was as sharp as any attorney I'd ever met. They worked around the clock, sifting through financial records, property deeds, and the forged documents Michael had used to steal everything from me. They found more than we ever expected. Michael had even tried to move some of my investments offshore, hiding money in an account in London under a false name. I watched all of this unfold from my hospital bed, my hands trembling a little less each day. I started to regain more movement, just enough to write more messages to David and sign official statements for the court. Every time my pen touched the paper, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Finally, the day arrived. David wheeled me into the courtroom in Lower Manhattan, a place I'd never imagined visiting in this way. The room was packed. Journalists, onlookers, and even a few former army friends who had flown in to support me. Michael sat at the defendant's table, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously. He looked at me once, just for a moment, and I saw no remorse, only fear. The trial was brutal. Michael's lawyers tried to challenge the authenticity of the recordings, but the evidence was overwhelming. The hidden cameras, the financial records, the handwriting analysis, all of it pointed to one truth. I had been betrayed by the person who was supposed to protect me most. David spoke for me in court, reading my statement aloud with a conviction that left the room in tears. When the verdict was read, I closed my eyes and let out a breath I'd been holding for months. The court ruled in my favor. Every asset would be returned, and Michael would be prosecuted for fraud, abuse, and perjury. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a fighter, and at long last free. The verdict rang out in the crowded courtroom, echoing in my chest like thunder rolling over the Hudson. The judge's words seemed to hang in the air, heavier than the rain tapping the windows of the courthouse that morning, guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and aggravated abuse. For a moment, time slowed, the world holding its breath as if even Manhattan itself was listening. Michael sat frozen at the defendant's table, all the smugness and bravado drained from his face. His lawyers looked defeated, sifting through papers that could no longer save him. I could hardly believe it was over. The legal battle had lasted months, but the emotional war had felt like an eternity. From the first moment Michael forced my limp hand onto those documents to this very day, I'd lived in the shadow of his betrayal. Now, the sun had finally broken through. My name was cleared. My property was restored. The world had seen the truth, and, perhaps most importantly, so had I. The judge's orders were swift and precise. My brownstone in Manhattan was to be returned to my name, as well as the entirety of my bank accounts and the Carter family vineyard in Napa Valley. My late father's art collection in London, which Michael had tried to sell off, was safe and would be sent back to me. Michael was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. Watching him be led away in handcuffs, I felt no satisfaction, only an immense weary relief. I would never have chosen this ending, but I understand now that justice is rarely tidy or triumphant. It is simply necessary. As soon as the gavel came down, the courtroom erupted into a flurry of noise. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised, shouting questions I couldn't answer. Cameras flashed, but all I could do was stare at the faces around me, my doctors, nurses, old army friends, and most of all, David. He was there beside me, as he had been through every step of this journey, his hand wrapped around mine, steady and sure. My voice was still silent, but my eyes met him, and I hoped he could see the gratitude, the relief, and the deep, unbreakable bond we now shared. Outside the courthouse, the streets of Manhattan bustled as usual. Yellow cabs honked, pedestrians hurried by, and life continued, indifferent to my private victory. But for me, everything had changed. The city felt new, like I was seeing it for the first time after a long, bitter winter. David wheeled me down the courthouse steps where more reporters waited, but he shielded me with his body, telling them, "Emily is not taking questions today." Instead, he guided me toward our waiting car and, with gentle strength, helped me inside. The ride home was quiet, and I found myself gazing out the window at the city I loved. Every street, every building held memories of late-night walks with Michael, of celebrations with friends, of long afternoons spent exploring the Met. I wondered how many more memories I might have missed if not for David's faith and perseverance. The hospital, the courtroom, the endless interviews, and physical therapy sessions, all of it had forged a new kind of strength inside me, deeper than any I'd ever known before. Arriving at my brownstone felt surreal. For months, it had belonged to someone else, a trophy for Michael's greed. Now, as David pushed my wheelchair through the familiar front door, the house welcomed me home. Dust motes danced in the sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. The scent of old wood and coffee, so ordinary, so precious, filled the air. In the living room, on the mantelpiece, stood the photograph of my father that Michael had once packed away. David had restored it, just as he had restored so much else in my life. The months that followed were not easy. Recovery never is. My injuries still confined me, but every day brought a small victory, a hand that could move. A word I managed to whisper during therapy, a letter scrawled in my shaky handwriting. The hospital staff became like family, celebrating each milestone with me. David was my constant companion, patient and steadfast, encouraging me when frustration threatened to overwhelm me. He never pushed, but he never let me give up. He read to me, played chess with me, and even managed to make me laugh again. Some days were harder than others. The nightmares of war and betrayal lingered, sometimes rushing in with a force I could hardly bear. But I was learning, slowly, to let go of the past. I was not defined by what Michael had done to me, nor by the scars I carried. Instead, I was shaped by the love and loyalty of those who stood by me. Each day, my circle grew a little wider. Old friends reached out. Strangers sent letters of support, and neighbors brought flowers or baked bread, shyly wishing me strength. The world was not as cruel as it had sometimes seemed. As my body grew stronger, so did my sense of purpose. With David's help, I began to use my story to advocate for other wounded veterans, especially those who could not speak for themselves. I shared my experience first through letters, then slowly, in interviews, as a way of shining light on the resilience that lies within us all. I wanted to show that survival was not just about enduring, but about rising again, even after everything has been taken from you. My voice, once stolen by injury and betrayal, became a tool for healing, not just for myself, but for others who needed hope. David remained by my side through it all. Our friendship deepened into something unspoken, a connection born of years and tested by hardship. He never once spoke of what might be next for us, never pressured me for more. But I saw it in his eyes, in the way he watched over me, in every gentle touch and encouraging word. Slowly, tentatively, I let myself imagine a future, a life rebuilt, not as it was, but as it could be. As spring returned to New York, I stood at my window, watching cherry blossoms flutter in the breeze, and felt the old ache in my chest ease. I was Emily Carter, soldier, survivor, friend. My journey was one of pain and loss, but more than anything, it was a testament to hope, justice, and to the unbreakable power of friendship. I did not get here alone. And though I could not yet say it aloud, I knew in my heart that this was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning.